Is this some kind of joke? The voice was young, sharp, and coated in a thick layer of contempt. It belonged to a man named Kyle, the owner of Tactical Advantage Armory, a gun shop so modern and sterile it felt more like a showroom for military-grade hardware than a place for hobbyists. He stood with his arms crossed, a smirk playing on his lips as he looked down at the old man standing before his glass counter. "Can I help you, Pops, or are you just here to smell the Cosmoline?" Gordon Holt, 86 years old, did not react. His back was a little stooped from the long march of years, but his eyes were clear and steady. They held a calm that seemed to absorb the younger man's hostility without reflection. He wore a simple, worn leather jacket over a plaid shirt, his hands resting gently on the countertop. He had been quietly examining a display of vintage firearm cleaning kits, his gaze lingering on a particular set of brass jags and brushes. He finally looked up from the display, his gaze meeting Kyle's. "I'm looking for a recoil spring guide for a 1911 A1, Gordon said, his voice a low, gravelly hum. "An original from the mid-40s if you have one, or something period correct." Kyle let out a short, derisive laugh. A couple of younger customers decked out in tactical gear and operator beards snickered along with him. "A 1911? Seriously? Grandpa, that's a museum piece. Why don't you get with the times? I can set you up with a modern polymer frame, lighter, higher capacity, something you can actually handle." He winked at his friends. "Wouldn't want you to break a hip." Gordon's expression didn't change. He simply waited, his patience a silent, immovable wall. "I'm not here for a new pistol," he said evenly. "I'm here for the part." The owner's smirk vanished, replaced by a flash of irritation. This old man wasn't playing his part. He was supposed to be doddering, easily intimidated, a relic to be mocked and dismissed. Instead, he just stood there, his quiet dignity, a subtle rebuke to Kyle's performance. "Look, we don't carry junk parts for ancient firearms," Kyle snapped, his voice rising. "This is a high-end establishment. We cater to serious shooters, not guys looking to patch up their granddaddy's war trophy." He leaned forward, lowering his voice into a conspiratorial, insulting tone. "Frankly, you don't look like our typical clientele. I'm not even sure you could pass the background check." A hush fell over the small group of onlookers. The insult was blatant, a direct accusation of senility or criminality. Gordon Holt slowly reached into his back pocket and pulled out a worn leather wallet, the kind that had been folded and unfolded so many times the creases were like canyons in the hide. He opened it with deliberate, unhurried movements. Kyle's impatience boiled over. "I don't have time for this. You're holding up my customers. Either buy something modern or get out." Gordon didn't look up from his wallet. He was searching for his driver's license, his old fingers carefully navigating the familiar slots. The simple act of him taking his time seemed to enrage the shop owner further. It was a rejection of the fast-paced, high-pressure world Kyle had built for himself. "Did you hear me?" Kyle's voice was a sharp crack in the quiet store. He gestured toward the door with a flick of his head. "I want you to leave. Now. We reserve the right to refuse service to anyone." Gordon finally found his license and placed it on the counter. His hand was steady. There was no tremor of fear or anger. There was only a profound sense of weariness, a disappointment that felt ancient. Kyle didn't even glance at the ID. He was on a power trip now, fueled by the attention of his small audience. He saw the old man's jacket was slightly unzipped, revealing the simple cotton of his plaid shirt. He noticed something pinned to the faded inner lining of the leather, a small, tarnished piece of metal shaped like a star. It looked cheap, like something from a gumball machine. "What's that piece of tin you got there?" Kyle sneered, pointing. "Did you win a prize at the county fair?" As Kyle spoke, he reached out, intending to shove Gordon toward the door. His thumb brushed against the old leather of the jacket, pressing for a moment against the small, hard shape of the metal star pinned inside. The sterile smell of gun oil and air conditioning vanished. For a split second, the world dissolved into a cacophony of sound and sensation. The deafening roar of artillery, the high-pitched scream of incoming mortar fire, the taste of frozen dirt and cordite filled Gordon's mouth. He felt the crushing weight of a friend on his back, the warm, sticky wetness seeping through his own uniform in the brutal sub-zero air of a Korean mountain pass. A memory flashed behind his eyes, a commanding officer, his face grim and frostbitten, pressing that same small, cold piece of metal into his palm. A voice strained with exhaustion and respect cut through the noise of battle. "You earned this, son." Then, just as quickly, the vision was gone. Gordon was back in the gun shop, Kyle's hand on his arm, the owner's sneering face just inches from his own. The tarnished silver star beneath his jacket felt impossibly heavy. Kyle shoved him, a hard, jarring push that sent the old man stumbling back a step. "I said get out, now. In a quiet corner of the shop, partially hidden behind a rack of overpriced tactical vests, a young man had been watching the entire exchange. He was in his early 20s, with a haircut so sharp and precise you could set a level to it. He wore civilian clothes, a plain t-shirt and jeans, but he stood with a ramrod straight posture that was anything but civilian. His name was Corporal Evans, and he was 2 weeks into his leave from the Marine Corps Security Guard detachment at the American Embassy in Paris. He was just here to browse, to feel a sense of normalcy before heading back overseas. He had noticed the old man when he first walked in. He'd noticed the quiet way Gordon carried himself, the economic and deliberate way he moved. He'd also noticed the faint, almost invisible outline of a faded patch on the shoulder of the old leather jacket, a shape he vaguely recognized from the history books at Paris Island. But it was the disrespect, the raw, undiluted contempt from the shop owner that made his blood run cold. He had seen ambassadors and foreign dignitaries treated with less ceremony, but he had never seen an old man treated with such venom for no reason. When Kyle physically shoved Gordon, something inside Corporal Evans snapped into place. It wasn't rage. It was a cold, clear sense of duty. He watched as Gordon, without a word of protest, turned and walked slowly out of the shop, the door hissing shut behind him. Kyle stood there, puffing out his chest, victorious. Evans set the magazine he was holding back on the shelf with a quiet click. He walked past the counter, giving Kyle a look so devoid of emotion it was more terrifying than any threat. He pushed the door open and stepped out into the bright sunlight of the strip mall parking lot. He saw Gordon Holt sitting on a concrete bench near the curb, not looking defeated but simply staring at the horizon, as if waiting for a bus that was decades late. Evans walked over, stopping a respectful distance away. "Sir?" he said, his voice quiet. Gordon turned his head slowly, his calm eyes settling on the young man. "Are you all right, sir?" Evans asked. Gordon gave a slight nod. "Just catching my breath. What he did in there, that wasn't right," Evans said, his jaw tight. He hesitated for a second, then committed. "That patch on your jacket, is that 1st Marine Division?" Gordon's eyes flickered with a hint of surprise. "You have a good eye, son. It's been a long time since anyone's recognized that." Evans felt a jolt. 1st Marine Division. And from the looks of this man, it wasn't from a recent conflict. He pulled out his phone. "Sir, with your permission, I'd like to make a phone call. I think some people would want to know about how you were just treated." Gordon looked at the young Marine, then back at the gun shop, then back to the young man's earnest, angry face. He gave another slow nod. "Do what you feel you need to do, son." Evans stepped away and dialed a number he knew by heart. It wasn't 911. It was the duty phone for his old unit's gunnery sergeant back at Marine Corps Base Quantico, less than 30 miles down the highway. The phone was answered on the second ring. Gunnery Sergeant Miller. The voice was pure gravel and authority. "Gunny, it's Corporal Evans." "Evans, what do you need? I thought you were on leave." "I am, Gunny, but I'm at a gun shop off Route 1, Tactical Advantage Armory, and you are not going to believe what I just saw." Evans quickly and professionally recounted the entire incident, his voice low and tight with controlled fury. He described the owner, the insults, the physical shove. He ended with the most important details. "Gunny, the man he threw out, he's an old-timer, wearing a 1st Marine Division patch. His name is Gordon Holt." There was a dead silence on the other end of the line. For a full 5 seconds, the only sound was static. When Gunnery Sergeant Miller finally spoke, his voice had lost all its gruffness. It was replaced by something else, something Evans had never heard before. Awe. "Say that name again, Corporal." "Gordon Holt, Gunny." Another pause. Then the command came, sharp and absolute. "Stay right where you are, Evans. Do not let that man leave. I don't care what you have to do. Offer to buy him lunch. Talk about the weather. Just keep him there. I'm making a call." The line went dead. Corporal Evans lowered his phone, a strange feeling blooming in his chest. He had just lit a fuse, and he had no idea how big the explosion was going to be. Gunnery Sergeant Miller stood in his small, cluttered office at Quantico, the phone still pressed to his ear. He hung it up, his hand trembling slightly. Gordon Holt, the name echoed in his mind, dredged up from dusty lecture halls and books on Marine Corps lore. It couldn't be. He didn't bother with the chain of command. He didn't call a captain or a major. He strode out of his office, his boots thumping on the linoleum with a purpose that made junior Marines flatten themselves against the walls. He walked directly to the headquarters building, past the colonel's and major's offices, and stopped before the polished oak door of the base commander, a 2-star general. He knocked once, a sharp, authoritative rap, and entered without waiting for permission. General Morrison, a man who had led troops in Fallujah and Helmand, looked up from his desk, His eyes narrowed at the breach of protocol. "Gunnery Sergeant?" "Sir, my apologies," Miller said, snapping to attention, "but I just received a call from a Marine on leave. He's at a civilian establishment in town. He's with a man named Gordon Holt." The general's expression didn't change, but a flicker of recognition appeared in his eyes. He swiveled in his chair and typed the name into a secure terminal on his desk. He stared at the screen for a long moment. Miller, standing at attention, could just make out the top line. Holt, Gordon, Sergeant Major, retired. Below it was a list of commendations and service records, so long and so heavily redacted it was almost comical. But a few key phrases were visible through the black ink. Battle of Incheon, Battle of Chosin Reservoir, conspicuous gallantry, 2 Purple Hearts, a Silver Star, and another higher award whose name was obscured, but whose gravity was unmistakable. General Morrison slowly turned back to face the gunnery sergeant. His face was pale. "Where did you say they were, Gunny?" "Tactical Advantage Armory, sir. The Marine reports that the owner just physically assaulted Sergeant Major Holt and threw him out of the store." The general stared at Miller for a beat, his expression hardening into something like cold granite. He pressed a button on his intercom. "Get me my driver, now. And tell the ceremonial unit I want an honor guard detail assembled on the double full-dress blues. We're taking a ride." Back at the gun shop, Kyle was basking in the glow of his triumph. He was regaling his friends with an exaggerated version of the encounter, painting himself as a vigilant business owner protecting his store from a potentially dangerous, senile old man. He glanced out the large front window and saw Gordon still sitting on the bench, now with the young, clean-cut man who had been in the store. The sight of them just sitting there felt like a challenge. His ego, still soaring, demanded a final act of dominance. He stormed out the door, his friends trailing behind him. He marched up to the bench, planting himself in front of Gordon. "I thought I told you to leave," he spat. "This is private property. If you're not gone in 60 seconds, I'm calling the police and having you arrested for trespassing." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a nasty whisper. "And I'll make sure to tell them, you seem confused, disoriented. Maybe a nice trip to a psychiatric ward will do you some good." Corporal Evans stood up, placing himself between Kyle and the old man. "I think you've said enough," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. Kyle scoffed. "And who are you?" "His grandson. Get out of my way before I have you arrested too." It was then that the sound began. A low, distant rumble that grew steadily louder. It wasn't the sound of a passing truck or a police siren. It was deeper, more resonant. It was the sound of multiple heavy-duty engines moving in perfect unison. Kyle and his friends turned to look down the road. Coming around the corner wasn't a police car. It was a convoy. 2 black, official-looking sedans led the way, followed by 2 menacing olive-drab Humvees. They moved without sirens, without flashing lights, but with a disciplined, inexorable momentum that was far more intimidating. They pulled into the strip mall parking lot, their tires crunching on the asphalt, and formed a perfect silent semicircle, blocking the entrance to Tactical Advantage Armory. The doors of the vehicles opened simultaneously. From the Humvees, a dozen Marines in immaculate dress blue uniforms disembarked. They moved with a chilling precision, forming 2 perfect ranks. From the lead sedan, General Morrison emerged, his uniform bristling with ribbons and 2 silver stars gleaming on his collar. The parking lot fell silent. Traffic on the main road slowed as drivers gawked at the incredible scene. Kyle's jaw hung open, his face a canvas of confusion and dawning horror. General Morrison ignored everyone. His eyes scanned the small crowd and found the old man sitting on the bench. His entire demeanor changed. The hard-nosed commander vanished, replaced by a look of profound, almost reverent respect. He strode forward, his polished shoes clicking on the pavement, and stopped 3 feet in front of Gordon Holt. He snapped to the most rigid, perfect salute a man could execute. His voice, a commander's voice accustomed to echoing across parade grounds, boomed through the silent parking lot. "Sergeant Major Holt, General Morrison, it is an honor, sir." Gordon looked up and for the first time, a flicker of emotion crossed his face. He slowly, a bit stiffly, rose to his feet. The general held his salute, turning his head slightly, so his voice would carry to Kyle and the stunned onlookers. "For those of you who do not know, you are in the presence of a hero of the Republic. This is Sergeant Major Gordon Holt, 1st Marine Division. He fought at Incheon. He was one of the chosen few, a member of the brigade that fought its way out from the Chosin Reservoir against 10-to-1 odds in the winter of 1950. He spent 3 days holding a hill against an entire enemy division, saving the lives of hundreds of his fellow Marines. The commendations he earned are too numerous to list here, but they are a testament to a level of courage most of us can only read about in books. As the general spoke, the honor guard, on an unheard command, presented arms with a single unified slap of hands on rifles that echoed like a gunshot. The sound made Kyle flinch. The phones that had been in the pockets of the onlookers were now out, but they weren't recording a mockery. They were recording a legend. Kyle's face had gone from white to a sickly shade of green. The world had just turned upside down, and he was underneath it. The general finally dropped his salute and turned his gaze upon Kyle. The warmth and respect in his eyes vanished, replaced by an arctic cold. He walked slowly toward the shop owner, who seemed to shrink with every step the general took. "You run this establishment?" the general asked, his voice now a low, dangerous whisper. Kyle could only manage a pathetic nod. "The United States Marine Corps has a long and proud tradition of supporting local businesses, especially those that cater to the needs of our servicemen and women," the general said, his voice dripping with ice. "That support is predicated on a baseline of mutual respect. Today, you failed that test in a spectacular fashion. You took a man, a giant, whose boots you are not worthy to polish, and you treated him like trash." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "As of this moment, Tactical Advantage Armory is officially and permanently blacklisted. No active duty personnel from Quantico or any surrounding installation will set foot in your store. I will personally see to it. You have disrespected a living legend, and in doing so you have disrespected the entire United States Marine Corps." Gordon Holt stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on the general's arm. "General," he said softly, "that's enough." He turned and looked at Kyle, whose eyes were wide with terror and shame. There was no anger in Gordon's face, only a deep, abiding sadness. "The things you sell in that store," he said, gesturing with his head, "they're just tools. They don't make a man strong or brave. That comes from in here." He tapped his chest gently. "Respect isn't something you demand because you've got the latest gear. It's something you give freely, especially to those who have come before you. Everyone carries a history, son. You just have to be quiet enough to see it." As Gordon spoke, the general's eyes drifted to the old man's jacket, which had fallen open. He saw the small, tarnished silver star pinned to the inside lining. The general knew exactly what it was. It was a silver star, the third highest military combat decoration. For a brief instant, as the sun glinted off the worn metal, another image filled Gordon's mind, not of receiving a medal, but of giving one. He was younger, kneeling in the frozen mud of a makeshift aid station in Korea. He was pinning his own, newly awarded silver star onto the uniform of a young private, a boy no older than 17 who lay still and pale on a stretcher. A boy who had thrown himself on a grenade to save Gordon and 2 others. The boy had died before the commanders could award him his own medal posthumously. So Gordon had given him his. The star he wore now, the one Kyle had called a piece of tin, wasn't even his. It was a replacement he was given later, a simple piece of metal he kept not as a trophy for his own valor, but as a humble reminder of another's sacrifice. The fallout was swift and brutal. The videos from the parking lot went viral within hours. The story was picked up by local news, then national outlets. Tactical Advantage Armory's online presence was annihilated by a tidal wave of 1-star reviews and scathing comments. Kyle's serious shooter clientele, many of whom were active or former military, abandoned him overnight. No one wanted to be associated with the man who had thrown a hero from the Chosin Reservoir out of his shop. General Morrison was true to his word. An official directive was posted on every bulletin board at Quantico, formally forbidding any personnel from conducting business with the store. The financial bleeding was immediate and catastrophic. Within 3 months, Kyle was forced to liquidate his entire inventory and sell the shop at a staggering loss. 6 months later, a man who looked a lot like Kyle but without the arrogant smirk and tactical clothing was stocking shelves in the canned goods aisle of a local supermarket. He was stacking cans of peas when he looked up and saw a familiar figure coming down the aisle. It was Gordon Holt, pushing a shopping cart. A little girl, his great-granddaughter, was sitting in the child seat, happily babbling away. Kyle froze, his heart pounding in his chest. He wanted to run, to hide behind a pyramid of soup cans. But there was nowhere to go. Gordon pushed his cart closer, and their eyes met. Kyle braced himself for a look of contempt, a cutting remark, or worst of all, a knowing smirk. He got none of it. Gordon Holt simply looked at him, and for a moment the steady calm in his eyes seemed to quiet the frantic noise in Kyle's head. The old Marine gave him a short, simple nod. It wasn't a nod of forgiveness nor of friendship. It was a nod of acknowledgement, a simple human gesture that said, "I see you." Then he continued down the aisle, listening to his great-granddaughter tell him a story about her day at school. Kyle stood there for a long time, a can of peas in his hand, feeling the full weight of the quiet, powerful lesson he had finally begun to understand. The story of Sergeant Major Holt is a powerful reminder that heroes don't always wear their greatness on their sleeves. True valor is often quiet, unassuming, and deserves our utmost respect. If you believe in honoring our heroes, like this video, subscribe to Veteran Valor, and share this story so that true courage is never forgotten. Join us next time for another tale of quiet strength.